Hi there, this is Dolly for the Caregiver's Voice, and today's episode will touch on the primary caregiver, what some people refer to as the surrogate caregiver, and others would call them the home-based caregiver. And this is very different from the topic of the caregiving broadly. So the caregiver could be you being the family person or the first point of contact because you know the person or the care recipient. However, we have the people sometimes that we hire to relieve us of the duties of a caregiver, mainly because one, you have to go back to your daily job, or sometimes because you just need the help at home. And so I'm touching on the primary caregiver. So the people we hire to come and take that place and actually just support us on the chores of caregiving. And this is a topic that is very, very tough for me. I still haven't found a solution for it. So feel free to give us your ideas as well. What has worked for you through emailing us at voicesemotional@gmail.com or even commenting on the comment section below. So I will touch on 3 specific areas that I've found very interesting and different. So first is how to source for this home-based caregivers. Secondly is how to stay with them, and even touches on how long they stay. So broadly speaking, sourcing for these caregivers is a very, very it's a long time investment, and also very financially draining. And if you take them from the from the main system, or for lack of a better terminology, from the specialized system, then they're very, very expensive and could cost you up to $800 a month if you need round the clock care, like I do. Then for some, if you need like a full day service, then that's about $400 a month. That's already expensive as it stands. And so the informal way that I do, and of course I also adapted it from how people do it within the system, would be looking for someone. So how we do it, at least in our family, would be looking for someone who's cared for a disabled person before, or who's cared for people with disability, or even different kinds of caregiving, someone with Alzheimer's or dementia, or things around that. And then once we find them, it will be just training them on the nursing duties that are required, and then having them join us at home. So for me, it's always very emotional, and I rarely actually interact with them during the onboarding process. So I always leave it to my parents and my sister, who better know how to explain the duties that are needed or the tasks that are needed. And so I find it, because you're pulling from an informal kind of pool of workers, they're not as skilled, and that means it takes quite a long time to onboard them and even get them accustomed to their tasks at the home. And secondly, it also means change of hands quite a number of times, and I'll touch that on the second bucket. So I know they're experts at this, and I think my friend Lisa is one of the best person to actually tell you how to source them and how really, really tough it could be. So again, if you have any ideas on that, please let me know. Then on the second angle of how to stay with them, or even how long they stay. So for us, the turnover period has been every 2 to 3 months. So every 2 to 3 months, you need to look for a new caregiver, because the first one might start acting up, or the first one might need to leave. And that leaves us at a very disoriented place, for sure, because I would say 80% of the aides that we've had at home always leave unannounced. And so that means maybe I was planning to go to work in the morning, and next thing I hear, someone has left. So that means I have to call at work and say, hey, sorry, I can't come in today because this and this has happened. And I'll have to work from home maybe until noon or something around that, until we have things figured out. Sometimes they might, one of the other things we've learned to do is actually identify the patterns. So after some time, you'll just start noticing very interesting habits. It would be, hey, I don't feel like going with you anymore to church, or I don't feel like joining you for the shoppings that you do every month, or I don't want to join you for lunches anymore. And once I start observing such things, then I'm always like, hey, Brenda, it's now time for us to actually start looking for a replacement, because these are the red flags that we've now started observing. So that being said, I also attended a really nice caregiver support group some time back. And what I had is, for Alzheimer's and dementia patients, they've had people take care of their care recipients for about 2 to 3 years, or even some 5 years. So such rare gems are very hard to find for sure. But then for disabled patients, it's almost been the same story as mine. So it could be maybe 3 to 6 months at most, and you have to change hands over. What this means for the care recipient, it's that, Dolly, why do I have to see a new person every other 6 months? It's very disorienting for them because they now start feeling like a burden, and they now start feeling like a bother. And if someone had already started recovering or getting out emotionally, then they get back to their shell. And what I've observed from my sister, forgive me for saying this, is that sometimes she also goes back to depression, especially when this happens. So it's also another moment of emotions, and Dolly coming in and saying, hey, it's gonna be okay, it's fine. I think by now we should start getting used to this. And it's always this intense, very, very intense emotional tug of war. And so that is again another thing I don't have a solution for. So sorry, this episode is not very solutions oriented, but I just needed to get this out there so that if anyone might have actually ideas or interesting solutions of how to handle this, then that would be amazing. The other really nice tip that I learned is that just like the maybe, let's say, overarching caregivers, these primary caregivers also go through the same emotional turmoil, and sometimes because they feel employed and paid for it, they rarely speak it out. And this is one of the most valuable lessons I drew from the support group. It was, anytime you start observing these red flags, already start having conversations with them, or even before, start having conversations with the caregiver, and start identifying how to support them, or even how to help them so that they're not also drained emotionally. I think I've tried this for the past two of them, and maybe they stayed a little bit longer than they should have, but it's something, of course, that you keep exercising over time to make sure that they, just like you, also have points and avenues of self-care and also self-reflection, because as much as they're paid for it, they, just like normal human beings, also go through the emotions. The last thing that maybe I would like to touch on this specific topic, and this I really, really borrow a lot from my friend Lisa, who has been the most amazing and incredible human being in helping me navigate this topic specifically. It's at least she's been on this journey longer, and I hope one day she gets the psych to come and speak to all of us. It's that sometimes they actually start getting abusive, and it's up to you to also take that as a red flag. So what you'll start observing is, not, I wouldn't say not abusive, as in extremely abusive. It's just they start, like, a lot of things start falling through the cracks. It would be, hey, they broke something in the house, or hey, they said something they shouldn't have said, and they said it in such a harsh way, or they spoke very rudely at a specific point in time, when they shouldn't have. So, and I'm really, really being polite with this, but sometimes it can be very, very very emotionally frictional, right? Because they would say something that really crosses you the wrong way. And I don't know how to actually explain it very explicitly, but one thing that Lisa said to me is that sometimes they even start feeling like they own the house, and they're the primary person in the house. And to be honest, I've fallen prey to this a million times, because I'm always like, hey, anything so that you just don't go. And I find myself saying, what do you need? And they would command me around the house, and say, yeah, we need this and we need that and we need that. And because I'm just at a place where I can't let go of stuff at work, I'm always like, anything, whatever you want, I will provide. So for this point, I would actually just like to add, I know how straining it could be, or how hard it could be on you. And for sure, as much as, yes, you want to keep them, just learn to also define your boundaries, because once it starts getting to that point where you're emotionally broken, or you're emotionally abused, and then of course it does even impact how you interact with other people. For sure, like, this has somehow also, before I dealt with it, it impacted how I interacted with the outside world. It would be, hey, if someone wants to do something, even though it's against my wish. I'd be like, yeah, just do it as long as you're fine and as long as I'm fine. So for this one, I would just say, like, keep a keen eye on yourself, because it also falls under the self-care bucket. That when things start getting tough, just know what trade-offs to make, and just make sure they're not as extreme trade-offs that they impact your emotional well-being. So again, just to like wrap this up, I would just say, I hope that it works for you when the time comes and you need caregiving, maybe for the elderly, for your family member, for yourself. That I hope for sure at that time things would be better in the world, and things will be better in Africa specifically, where we don't have a wide pool of very well skilled and trained caregivers, that would be very affordable for our economy. So I really hope things will be changed then. But if not, I pray that you are able to find solutions to these things that I've raised. And just to, from my end, it's just to create the awareness so that you have a mental note of what things to actually have in mind as you prepare for the caregiver journey. So again, if you have solutions, email us or drop us a note on the comment box below. Thank you for listening. See you in 2 weeks. Bye.